So welcome to another war game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at Beware the Ides of March from Hollandspiele. And Beware the Ides of March, this is a two-player hex encounter, kind of big, they say it was operational? Operational.
Yeah. Sandbox kind of is what they said.
Sandboxy game.
But we disagree with that statement. I would not call it a sandbox, truly a sandbox.
I think it is, but there's no point in seeing most of it.
You could do some sandboxy stuff and go down here and play in the sand of North Africa, but it's not going to do anything.
Yeah. So this game's designed by John Thiessen, and he had designed a couple of years ago a game called Antony and Cleopatra, and also from Hollandspiele.
Which we didn't play.
No, and it's funny because I've been on their website and I have wanted to, and I was like this close to buying it. It is back in,
like they have it, you can buy it.
Yeah, so thematically, this comes before that. So but I don't know if rules and mechanics wise, I don't know how much they share. I just don't know that. Maybe I should look that up.
So this one's before. This is like a sequel to that game.
So this is like a prequel to that game.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm an idiot.
Yes, we were discuing the timelines.
We had a whole discussion.
Yes. So yeah, this one was released afterwards, but this one is set before.
Okay.
But I haven't played that, so I want to say might share some thematic elements. I don't know if they.
I did read something today before we came over, and they're similar. I think the naval movement has been changed in this one fairly significantly, but how I don't know.
Right. But if you've played that, then this is kind of in that line, and you're going to play in a similar time frame at least. So this is the subtitle is the Liberators' Civil War. So one of you is going to play as Brutus and Cassius, who have very recently murdered Caesar. And
liberated the Republic. Right?
Yes, liberated
from his dictatorial.
Yeah. So I'm, you're the liberators, but you also were the backstabbers. they really thought they were doing something.
Yeah.
And then the other side of you plays the loyalists. I don't know what they call them. I can't remember. Oh, they just call it the triumvirate. But
yeah, the triumvirate. Yeah.
So
Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus.
Yeah, but Lepidus basically doesn't do anything. He just sits in Africa and is like, yeah. You guys take care of it, right? So each side has two leaders, and each side has kind of like some stacks of units. And this is a game of trying to get yourself into combat and defeat the opponent. That's the reality of it. So this is a game where you're trying to not accrue prestige points necessarily. You're trying to remove them from your opponent, because this is a game of legitimacy.
Right. So it's kind of in many ways a reverse victory point tracking.
You both start
at
at 14 prestige points or victory points, and you can lose them in combats.
Any number of ways, actually.
When guys die, or if you're the triumvirate and you have those revolts kicking around, you can lose it. If your leaders die, you can lose more prestige. You can win a few if you win a big battle, or if you get like 1 point if you win a small battle, but I'm going to get 1 point, but I'm going to have inflicted 1 or 2 because you took losses.
Yeah.
But all of that happens in combat. Combat is the significant focus of this game.
You did point out a very important part. I felt like most of our combats, very attritional, right?
Yes.
Anytime as the defender I would lose one, typically you would lose one as well.
Yeah, very.
Almost always.
You have to have both good odds and a good roll to eliminate an enemy stack. And if you've done that, you've won the game.
Yeah. So it's unique and interesting. I think it models ancient warfare fairly well, right?
Yeah,
always attritional.
That part of it was I like that. So
yeah, the combat was fun.
Yeah,
I did enjoy that.
The back of the rules has this kind of loss converted table, and the losses are taken in percentages of units.
Yeah. So like your CRT says, it'll say 20, so that means 20% losses. So when we were first looking at this, we were going, oh boy, I've got to do some mental gymnastics every time we do a combat.
But you just look at the chart. Table. And this reminds me of Genesis.
Yes.
That had that very similar thing. This part of it, very Bergian.
And I will say this, it is losses not based on strength points, it is based on number of units. Because some units are worth 2,
Yeah, so if you have like
veteran legions,
3 veteran legions in a stack,
that's
they're
worth 6
2 apiece.
combat.
That's 6 combat. They're good in combat, but when you take a loss, that's a third of your fighting strength.
Yeah.
It is significant, and you go from a 6 to a 4. That's really easy for someone to then get
Let
2
me see
to
the
1,
back of
3
that
to
chart
1 on
again
you.
real quick. Yeah, it's so yeah. If you had those 3 units and
you
rolled
hit
a
a
10,
20%.
a 20%, you're going to lose 1.
But that 1 counts for 2 strength points.
That's big.
Which can cascade
It is
very
big.
quickly. So I really like that part of it. Because when we've seen that kind of thing, I think about something like Lincoln from PSC Games, where it was like, here's my big stack, and I take a bunch of losses, right? I want to put the body bags in there so that the number of counters I lose doesn't hurt me as much.
Struggle for Europe was like that.
Yes, so in this one, it's those auxiliaries. If you
Worthington.
can get those in there,
They help.
you
take
absorb
the
losses on those because it's numerically easier to recruit back those guys.
Yeah.
But that has its own stuff. But I like that in games. I liked it in Genesis as well. I like that combat system. I just think it's interesting. It's something that's a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, we have Genesis was one of those games that when we first played it, we were like, "Holy mackerel, this is amazing!"
It's really fun, super imbalanced.
Well,
but I enjoy
now
it.
that we've played it more with other people, you're like, "Oh boy, this faction's terrible," right? You just have no shot.
Yeah.
But it's fun because the combat is very interesting and unique. There's also a prisoner take. We're not doing a review of that game.
and that's
trying
like,
to compare.
That's
this.
like a whole Civ builder, but the combat system
It's similar.
reminds me a lot of this as well.
Yeah, agreed.
And the combat system was one of the things I really liked in that game.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit simpler and a bit more streamlined in this one because calculating your power in that game was a real pain.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas in this one, it's
Well,
ones
they make
and
it
twos
simple.
and that's it.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have 35 combat strength.
No,
I think the most we ever had was somewhere around 8 or 9. I don't think I ever
Yeah.
had any higher than that.
I think it was. It's difficult to leverage more than that
Yeah.
in a single combat.
Well, it's difficult for a couple of reasons. The way movement works, the way units, where they start, how you can transport units across. Let's face it, the Mediterranean, the limiting factor on most combat was how you could move navally
Yeah.
to get into position. And the way the naval rules work, you're only going to be bringing 2, maybe 3
Yeah.
units.
I had 2
4, I think,
transports,
was
so
the
you can get
most.
4 over in a given transport phase.
If you only move one space.
Yeah.
Which
is,
a lot of these
you know,
spaces are one
I have
space.
that, yeah.
But so I think those factors ended up basically limiting the number of strength points. So we never really saw the higher. Well, we did get a 6 to 1 one time, but
But effectively, this is a game where the only way to gain prestige is through defeating someone in combat.
Yeah.
The only way to lose prestige is by losing stuff in combat.
Yep.
And the way that you win this game is by your opponent being reduced to 0 prestige. What that tells you is that you have to go and fight.
Yep.
And so that's what you do. You recruit as many guys as you can, and then you go and you have my big old stack against your big old stack, and we battle it out until someone loses.
Yep.
That's the reality of what this game does. You're going to move, 6, 7, 8 hexes with some naval transport in between. You might do a naval battle, a little skirmish here and there.
Yep.
To kind of maybe like pick up, to inflict 1 prestige loss on you for losing a guy or to soften you up. But the reality is you're going to end up with a couple big stacks and you're just going to go at it.
Well, and I also think the reality is, and we talked a little bit about this, this is a huge board. It covers the entirety of the Mediterranean, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
From Spain all the way over to
Like Asia
Minor and Egypt. But 90% of that board you're never going to use. Let's face it. We
without
talked
question.
about this. The fighting is all going to come to a head in Macedonia, in Greece. That's where it's going to happen. I don't know where else it's... There was one time where I thought you might come across into Italia, but I was swinging down above you, so you were like, okay, I understood why you didn't. I would have liked to have seen you do it just to see
Sure.
what would have changed, but
But what does change if I do that, right? Nothing.
I cut you off, I kill your things, and then I just attrit the hell out of you.
Because what this game is about is getting into combat and
Yeah.
inflicting losses.
Yeah.
And so
It's not about really controlling areas.
all of this big map, you like control regions so that it's slightly easier.
Slightly. And when we say slightly,
Very slightly.
it's very slightly.
Like if I control 4 regions, I got to hit a 5 or a 6 generally
To recruit.
to recruit one of my replaced losses. To get that to a 4, 5, or a 6, I gotta go out and I gotta occupy 3 more territories.
7. Yep.
And
That's
I
hard.
have to leave combat units in
Yep.
each one of those
So
neutrals
you dilute the power of your stack
to get
in
a
an
better
effort
roll.
to get a unit back. We felt like that part of the game felt hollow.
It was entirely meaningless.
Yeah.
Because what happens is you have these reinforcements that come on in the first
Automatically.
4 turns of the game. And so what you do is, I've got all my guys here. I kind of combine them into one stack, which you couldn't do, you think.
Yeah, it wasn't real clear, but I understand why we couldn't.
So I'm going to move over here. I'm going to get a couple of natural replacements in those first couple of turns. My stack's going to be as big as it ever can be.
Yep.
And then I'm going to try to fight each of your 2 individually strong, but not massive monster stack. So, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yep.
Because that's the only way to reduce someone's prestige is to damage them in combat.
Yeah.
So
We've said that a couple of times. I think.
yes, but I want to make that clear.
Make it clear, yeah. It's about combat.
That the victory conditions make that what the game is.
Yes.
There's all this control stuff that is, you can't get any prestige from it, basically.
Has very little impact.
It's almost no bearing on the game because you will only ever be as strong as you can be like 3 or 4 turns into this essentially 24 turn game. So if you're as strong as you ever will be, that's when you should do your attacks.
Yeah.
And then the game's going to be over.
Yeah. Well, and in our game, we made it through the entire year of 42 BC.
And it was,
right?
and I can see it
you
because
were
it was
down-
done, because I...
Well, you were down to
3 prestige, I think.
3 prestige, and you had
3 combat units.
2 combat units.
Oh, that's
your
right. One is a supply, yeah.
So
Like
you
it was
literally had a nice little stack, but you're only going to be rolling once, having to roll a 6 to recruit. That's probably not going to happen. And then I've got 2 stacks that had 8 power. So you did the right thing. Now, we talked about it. You could have got in your boat. You could have run over to Asia Minor, and you could have started, and then I would have had to have come over. It would have taken me a couple of turns, but ultimately...
But you almost can't, because I had killed your naval squadrons.
Yep.
And so your transports were tied up and weren't really going to go anywhere. And so you would have kind of been stuck as well.
Yeah.
Or you'd have had to go all the way back here and then march into Africa, come all the way, at which point I'll just go over here.
Yeah,
yeah. And
so
then I don't have a way to gain the points back.
Right.
And so
nor
the game's
inflict
over.
those losses on me because you didn't have enough guys to fight.
So
So you
it's
conceded.
over.
And we talked about this. I'm not so sure that's not going to happen. Now, there are ways, I think I saw a couple of ways early on strategically where if you'd have moved one more space or gotten one more thing, it might have turned a little bit. But it does come down to some die rolling.
It's dice rolling in combat, but the thing is that I think it's possible, any side can win, but it will always be, in that very first year, you got these big old stacks and you're going to go at it. Because there's no, like other games, it's like, oh, let's go spread out, let's go get prestige by doing this and doing that. Well, you don't get any prestige by doing this and doing that.
It was interesting because when we were talking about the game before we played it, we're looking at the components, we're looking at the board, and I'm like, wow, I've got 13 of these and you've got 13 of those. And I'm like, yeah, this is about like going out and area controlling and gaining things. And when we started to realize the only advantage to controlling areas is
a minor boost.
Minor boost. The other key thing, though, is where you can put those reinforcements. That's the only other, because like you going back to this area, you could actually reinforce there.
Yeah.
It's a hard roll, but you can still reinforce.
But I don't need 13 control marks.
No, you don't. and it was deceiving a little bit because I'm not sure that you're ever going to use, well, even the Romans, because you don't have enough troops, because you have to leave guys Like
to
Alicrium.
maintain control of neutral
Yep,
areas.
Alicrium up here, I would have had to have left a legion to control that.
Which you should never do.
There's no reason
because you want to have optimally large stacks.
The largest military that you can get.
And then, when it comes to like winter, and it's like, oh, some attrition, I'm going to spread them out in the movement phase so that we're not doing that.
Yep.
And then next turn, suck them all up back together again.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is an interesting game. It was not what we thought it would be.
No.
And I think after playing it, some of the processes seem underpowered or underutilized, or I dare say it, underdeveloped, in my opinion.
So, if you made this game on like a 22 by 17
card.
map, this is the tactical part, and you took all of the rest of this out, and you just had that on like an abstract track, there's no difference.
Yeah.
Right. I got all this sweet looking hex map, and it looks great, and they did a really good job of the artwork. You will never go into this hex.
No.
Never. You will never go into that hex.
No.
Never. Like, so much of this is negative space.
Yeah.
That will never be used.
Yeah.
Because, once again, the victory conditions mean that you should and will bring your forces together for combat, and that's how it's going to end.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's a really... I feel like that part of it was a miss, because like you said, the game's called the Ides of March. Ooh, it sounds like there's going to be political intrigue and all this stuff, and like...
And there is some of that with the defections and but it's not...
But what do the defections do?
Impactful enough.
The defections make it easier or harder to recruit, and it denies you where you can recruit military units so that you can get or not get military units so that combat is more or less difficult, because that's what it's about.
Or eliminate units with the targeting hex.
But it's all about...
But that's very hard to do.
Military stuff.
Yeah, it's because,
And I think that's the part that disappointed me with this one, was I was hoping that, the political part of it,
would sweep
the
in,
control, the legitimacy would have more impact, when really it's like a race to not go to the bottom first.
Yeah.
And that's purely a military thing.
Yeah.
So I will show you how some of this works, at least, so you can get a better gauge of what we're talking about. But then we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So here's a look at the map. We have, like we said, very large hex encounter grid of the Mediterranean. For reference, like you can see, this is kind of a regular. I don't know the sizes of these. This is probably a 5/8 of an inch counter, I think. And these hexes are, I don't know, 1.5 inches, maybe, I think. I'm not quite sure. But you can see they're big, they have enough holding box space, and partly you need that in spaces where you've got like a little supply or a control marker, you might have some naval units, and you got some land units, and so they do a really good job of giving you enough space for that. We have kind of our prestige track, a little turn track, and then there's a bunch of charts and tables all on here, and then our combat resolution table as well. You do have like a play aid, which is on the back. This has the fixed reinforcements, the terrain effects, and then a loss converter table, because these results on the combat table give you percentages, and then this gives you, if you rolled that percentage versus how many units you have in the stack, that's how many pieces you remove, just to make it a little bit quicker, so you don't have to do all the maths and rounding when you've got larger stacks or kind of awkward numbers, and makes it go nice and quickly. But basically the game's played over a series of rounds, so it gives you 4 years, and in each year there's 6 turns, a winter turn, a summer turn, and then 2 kind of regular turns is what we'll call them as well. Mostly those turns, the summer and the winter ones, affect storms and supply. That's real attrition. Supply, it's kind of the same thing in this one. It affects those mechanics, but not much else, honestly. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get some reinforcements if you've got them, and then there's a defection phase, which is one of the interesting parts of the game. And basically, so the red player has more prestige than the blue player by 5, which they do, and the blue player is in very low or low prestige, then you can try to have those, you can try to roll some defection. So if, for example, I was on a 26 and you were on 18, I've got 5 more, but he is still in high prestige, and so, you know, he's not going to have any defection. So once your prestige starts lowering, which will happen quite quickly as your guys die, you will then get into this potential for defection. And quite simply, you are going to pick a target. You might target one of these white key provinces. If you do, so we've got Achaia here, and we have in this province, there's a red bordered line here. We have combat units on the ground in this, so we can attempt to see if that region defects. The other thing that you could do is, if you're adjacent to a stack, you can try to see if a unit from that stack defects. That's very difficult. You got to roll a 6 for anything meaningful to happen. If they have auxiliaries or horses in there, you can roll a 5 and they might go away, but that's still very difficult to do. It's quite unlikely. But changing control of these is more important, I think, though it's, you know, even then, there's parts where you have to do a lot, basically. But to do that, you literally take a d6, and the game gives you one red d6, and you will just roll. So we're going to pick here on this target province right here, because we're not targeting a hex, we're targeting a province. And then we are going to just roll, and I rolled a 4, 1, 2, no effect, 3, 4, no effect. I had to roll a 5 or a 6, and I didn't, so nothing happens in the defection phase. But if I had succeeded at that, this goes away, this goes on, I control that province, I can levy guys in there for replacements, and the opponent now cannot. Conversely, because I messed that up, I don't take control, and so my opponent can continue to get replacements there. Once we've done that defection phase, and so getting replacements and trying to recruit auxiliaries happens in the reinforcement phase. Again, it's just a roll. Oh, let's see, we can't even see that. Sorry, the map's a little bit tight here. I'm just going to move over a second. So we have our recruitment table here. And so the recruitment table, you get a bonus if you have high prestige. Well, you're not going to for a lot of the game. Indeed, if you have very low prestige, you're going to take a penalty, which the blue player does. And if it's winter, you can take another penalty. But you're trying to roll, and if you roll high, you're going to potentially get a replacement. And replacements are quite literally guys from the dead box will come back onto the map for you. You can also roll to see if your auxiliaries come on. So we have this Gallic auxiliary, but we actually have, and again, I will move this down again, the Gallic holding box up here is actually in revolt, and so they will not, regardless of what we do, they will not give us any auxiliaries at the moment. So you just roll dice, and basically you have this column here that says if you control 13 provinces, you need a 2 or more to succeed, and you get a replacement or you get an auxiliary, depending on what you're rolling. If you only control 10, you need a 3 or more. If you need a 7, you need a 4 or more. So again, going from 7 to 8 provinces doesn't move this needle. Going from 8 to 9 provinces doesn't move this needle. Only going from 9 to 10. So you have to take 3 provinces, which you can only really do, you can take neutral ones, but you got to leave guys behind. But that's to take key provinces away. That's 3 full turns, because you can only attempt 1 defection per turn. So in 3 turns, if I succeed at all of those, which I have to have a guy in there, so I have to have marched across 3 provinces across the whole board, basically, then I might get +1 on the die roll, effectively, is what that is, to recruit guys. If you've taken 3 key provinces away from the opponent, you will have had to have battled so hard to do that the game will be over. This is what we talk about, where some of those things don't quite work as well as I think that they may have been intended. So you're going to do all that, then you're going to do the movement and the combat. And the movement and the combat is the good and very interesting part of this game that I really liked. So first off, you have naval moves. So you're going to move all your naval units. And so to move all your naval units, you will, you've got these transports. The little transports have a T on them. They're for transporting units, you may have imagined. But then you have these regular boats, these squadrons, that do not have a T on them. In the naval movement phase, you can move all of your naval units. So this is where you might move your transport to position him into this hex. You might move your transport down here or whatever. The Romans didn't have any squadrons, so they killed them all. So you do all of your naval moves, then you do all your land moves. In this one, you attack adjacent, so we don't actually need to move those guys. One of those guys will kind of get picked up on the transport in the transport phase. And so again, this is what we're going to end up with is big stacks attacking big stacks. Spreading guys out might help you control some neutral provinces if you leave them, but what you gain from that is not great. And what you lose from that is having weaker stacks, which means you will lose combats more often, which means you'll lose prestige and you'll lose the game. So it's a tough thing to commit guys to and see any benefits from it, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So you do your land moves, but say I'm up here, I'm just going to move across this mountainous boundary is 1.5, and then I'm going to move into here where there's not that mountainous boundary, that's 1. Ground units have 3 movement points, sorry. And so they're just going to move so that I can do an attack. But then you have a transport phase. So at that point I can then, a guy gets onto the transport and the transport can then move 5 spaces. So he could go, you can kind of skirt around and you could drop a guy off. You wouldn't go down here, but you could if you were so inclined. And you drop a guy off. Or if you only move 1 hex, beep, you can bring 2 guys. And that's important because, so we're going to bring 2 guys. Again, you would never do this because you would never split your stacks like this. That just is not good gameplay. But why that is important is because you have this kind of 2 hex bridge between southern Italy and western Greece. So you're going to have a couple transports here, and if they only move 1 hex, each transport can bring 2 guys. We've got 2 transports, that's 4 guys can hop along. A leader can always hop along for free. That's a significant stack to have moved. Again, and it's the opposite, it's the same on the opposite side of Greece over here. So all of the what do they call them? The liberators, that's right. They all kind of start here, and it's this one hex transport movement, so they can quickly move guys over. Again, if you're trying to move guys down to Africa, it's going to take you so long that you'll have lost the game by the time they do anything. And effectively, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get big stacks into combat. And so we'll do a combat we've got here, and it's going to be a walkover for the Romans, but just to give you an idea of the kind of game that this is and why you want to have good combat. So in this one, this is a supply unit. He doesn't have a combat value. This is a leader. This is Octavian. He doesn't have a combat value, but he gives you a combat shift. So that is important. Other than that, you'll see these 2 different types of units. You have these banners, standards. There's a real name for these, I don't know what it is. And they have this kind of crown or ornamentation on the top. These are veterans. These are regulars. And the veterans are worth 2 in combat. So Octavian has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 combat power, and he's got 4 units. The liberators don't have a leader, which is a bummer for them, but they have 4 combat strength across 2 units. So we're going to start on, we didn't get, so I got 4 and 6, right? So I didn't get 2-to-1 odds, because we're going to attack from here to here. So we're going to start with the 1-to-1 odds. However, because we have our leader, and because I don't have a leader, we are going to get a combat shift for that. And so we're just going to roll on the 2-to-1 table, and kind of see what happens. Only the attacker rolls, and they will pull up some interesting results, hopefully. So we're going to roll the die. Oh, perfect. I rolled a 6. Oh, no, that was... So we consult this CRT down here. The attacker takes 20 losses and retreats. That's very bad. We did not want to do that. And the opponent only takes 10% losses. So 20% losses for the attacker. Again, we're going to go over to our table, and we have 4 combat units. So we go 4 combat units, and we took 20%, that's only 1 unit. So we're obviously going to kill the guy who's only worth 1. So our units went down by 25%, but our combat effectiveness didn't go down by quite that much. Now, for these guys, we rolled the 10. We only have 2 units, and 2 units, 10%, there's no physical manifestation of those losses on the board. So really this was extremely bad for Octavian. That did not go well. And Octavian has to retreat, but as the attacker, retreats are always optional. Because you attack from an adjacent space, you don't really move in there to retreat back or get knocked back, you just sit where you are. So that was great defense. Great, that was our little combat section. So the interesting thing here is that no one has declared the winner of that combat, as far as we can tell. So the winner of combat is declared if if either side received an attacker eliminated, a defender eliminated, or a defender retreat results, and there's another stipulation which we'll get into here, and that opponent took a loss, basically. So because the attacker received the retreat and the defender did not, that no one wins this battle. It's effectively, it's assessed as an exchange, even though you would say that was a tactical loss for Octavian. So what that means is that blue doesn't gain prestige from winning battles. Indeed, red, Octavian loses 1 prestige. You lose 1 prestige for each combat unit that is removed from combat. So that's not good. But if I had won the battle, not only would red lose 1, but blue would gain 1, and you close that gap. That's the only way in the game is to gain prestige, is to win battles. And you just won't fight enough to like make it up to 30, and if you do, good for you. I have no idea how you did that. But that's what a combat looks like. The thing in this game, though, is that you can attack multiple, you can attack the same hex multiple times. What you cannot do is attack with 2 stacks against 1 at the same time. You have to roll each of those combats individually, right? The scale of this game and the command and control doesn't allow you to do combined hexes, basically. So let's say I can't remember where I was down here. It's a bit of a mess. So I was in this little hex here. I defended nicely. So Octavian's like, well, that wasn't fun. I'm going to sit there. And so then we're going to flip over to, okay, let's bring Anthony. Let's say Anthony's kind of in this little stack over here, and he's going to attack separately. Again, I do like that that separation rule because it makes the game quite asymmetric, because it's the loyalists, Octavian and Anthony, cannot stack together, we believe. Whereas the loyalists can, and I think, or the liberators can. I think that's very interesting. So we're going to say, well, that didn't go well. We're going to go again, basically. So in this one, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 combat points against 4. So again, we're going to go on that 1-to-1 table. We've got a leader, so we're going to go 2-to-1. And again, because it's a leader versus a stack with no leader. So we'll go 2-to-1. We're going to roll again. I rolled a 6 again. That's very bad. So effectively, we're going to lose another game. Oh, we're at 5, though. Let's double check that. So again, this is why you always have to check, because we were at 6 and we did a 20% loss. I'm at a 5, we're going to take another one. But if you happen to only have 2 and take a 20% loss, you don't actually take any losses. So that would be very bad. We would lose a guy and we would lose another prestige, but blue wouldn't gain any because it's the same result. So let's pretend we rolled a different result just to see something different here, because I think my favorite part of this game is all these question marks. All these question marks on this CRT were so fun. So if you roll a 4 or a 5, you got a question mark. And then what question mark does is that you then roll on this question mark table. So normally, right, the attacker rolls and we both get a result. That's what happens. Well, we rolled a question mark. What happens now is that individually and separately, we both roll on that question mark table. So the attacker's going to roll, and I'm going to roll, and it's a straight die roll of 2. So what it is this then fills out the results for this. So it's a lot of variability. So the attacker rolled 10%. That's not good, because this is a straight die roll. And then the defender is going to have rolled a 2 as well. That's a 10. That's not great. So we're going to, again, consult that table. I have 3 units here and 2 units here. I can tell you right now that at 3 and 2, 0 doesn't really do anything, or 10% doesn't do anything. So we don't take any losses. However, because neither of us rolled this 60R result, at the attacker's whim, he can continue. And you just start the combat process over again. So you're going to roll again on this 2-to-1 table, and then you're going to go back over here. And why that's important is because if you do inflict losses, let's say the attacker had rolled this 33, or the defender had rolled a 10, and the attacker had rolled a 33, we would inflict losses, and then we could go again. So these question marks, there is a significant opportunity for the combat to keep going effectively until the death. And I think that was something that's really interesting. But again, it makes those combats so important. You cannot split your forces for regional control, and it pushes you towards a short, sweet combat to the death with massive death stacks. It's what it does. I'm going to be honest. But the doing of this was really fun. So the attacker's like, well, yeah, I definitely want to go again. So we're going to roll on the 2-to-1 table. So we roll on the 2-to-1. I rolled another 5. So we're going to go to the question mark series again. And so I'm going to roll. The attacker rolled a 1. That's really bad. And the defender, rolled another 1. 5% on either of these doesn't do anything. Again, the attacker can attempt to go again. Now, again, if I'd rolled a 1, effectively the attacker doesn't do anything, but the defender had rolled a 4 and we did 33%. We go over here, I've got 3 units, 33%, I have to kill a guy. All of a sudden, we're going to roll on a 1-to-1 again. We're going to have that column shift 2-to-1. But you don't have those dispensable units anymore, and this becomes much more risky, right? Because now when we start taking losses, let's say I rolled a 1, that's actually on the 2-to-1 table, basically it's going to be very bad. So 33, we both are going to take a loss. So he's going to take a loss and lose a prestige. I'm going to take a loss because I was on the 43. I'm going to take a loss. So we're all just dying. We're just killing each other to death with attrition. But I have that retreat result, which means I have to retreat out of there. And there's nowhere to actually retreat in this instance, so I would actually have to die, which is not good. Because when you retreat, you have to end away from the enemies. And in this instance, there's nowhere to go. But, I'm going to lose a prestige. They're going to lose a prestige. But the attacker enforced a defender retreat option on them, and the opponent took a loss, which means I do win the combat, which means, and I just want to make sure, yeah, the other side eliminated at least one, and you enforced a DR result, so we did do that, so the red's actually going to gain back that prestige that covers up the loss that they took. But you can see that was very expensive, and I'm all dead. Now this is the end of the game, but if you have to be very careful about how and when you attack, because you have to do it at maximum possible odds with maximum units, so you can absorb those losses if you get into rolling combat, because you have the option to retreat as a defender. You can retreat before combat, but it is a die roll, and you might get stuck into that cycle, or you might have nowhere to retreat and just have to fight it out. But again, fighting is the only way to gain prestige. It's the only way to lower your enemy's prestige. And so that's what you should be doing in this game. But that's how the game works. What we'll do is we'll wrap up here with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the game. Lovely looking game.
There's no doubt.
They really did a good job with the production.
Well, now that you've seen the board, I'm not so sure the board is not as large as it is because of all of this, right? But you could have done this and sucked it up and then just
made a play. I don't know.
Sure.
Because I'll be honest, I love it when stuff's printed on the board.
I do too.
I really do. Makes it nice and convenient.
We can both see it. We can both access it. We can both study it. And it's right there. We were making the rolls right here and going, oh, this is a naval battle. Boom. That's what we do. Oh, this is a land battle. Boom.
And
that's
I
what
really
you do.
like the CRTs. I like the
interesting.
combat results. That's the interesting part of it.
Yeah.
I just wish it was more than just my big stack's here, your big stack's here, and then we roll on this and we see the results, and then one of us is lost.
Yeah.
Because that's what it feels like. Mm-hmm. Even though there is a bit more to it than that, that's kind of what it boils down to, which I felt wasn't as fulfilling as I wanted it to be.
Sure.
I think that's a fair way to say
it. Well, I say this often. I think this is an analogy that I use, probably overuse, but when I eat a steak, right, it fulfills me in any number of ways, from taste to being full. And that's what I thought this would be. I really honestly thought this would be a steak dinner. I felt like this was more of a snack, right? This is more of an appetizer, and it's going to play. It says 60 to 90 minutes, and that should have been a,
Sure.
you know,
But like, it's 60 to 90 minutes because it takes you 60 minutes to get your guys together, and then it takes 5 minutes to resolve the combat, and one of you is lost.
sure. I think you're overstating that, but you're correct in the yes. Yes.
So I think the thing, and I think the other part of that is that, again, my expectations for this game were very different because you were like, "Oh, Ides of March,
Yeah.
this would be cool, great." I was excited for that. Thought
I
it
was
would
very
be
excited for
like
it.
a Hex Encounter Ancients game like this. I like the theme because I love this part of Roman history. I think that the triumvirate and then the splitting of that after this with Antony and Cleopatra, I think is fascinating. I love that part of it. So I was like, "Oh, the theme's so good."
Yeah.
But when I read the rules, I could tell what this was going to be. And I think I was like, oh no. There's not enough. When it talks about like the temporary nature of the control of neutral spaces and having to leave your guys, but the victory conditions are what they are, I was like, and it played out pretty much how I thought it was gonna, which was kind of sad because they say up front, like one of the first lines in the actual rules part is that like, this particular conflict was resolved in turn 5 of year 1.
Yeah.
So historically, it was a 5-turn game. They give you 24 turns, and it was like, okay, if it was resolved like that, then that's probably what one of the players is definitely going to do. And so, why did we bother with the last 3 years?
Sure.
Because they got all this extra rules for like the Parthians invading and like all this other stuff happening. It's like, why would you ever touch Sicilia?
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing about the Parthians and what was the other?
The Illyrian.
Well, the green guys. Did they come up there?
Yeah. The green guys
Okay.
were the Illyrians.
So the Parthians, it's like when they come in year 3, it like destroys you.
And it's
If the game is still going by that point, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I'm going to lose control of a couple areas if I have,
Yeah.
because I think they come up here. I can't really remember. I read the rules, but it's like, what are we doing? You're never going to get there.
Yeah.
But we wrote rules and gave you pieces for it.
Yeah.
And if you're getting there, you are playing this game
Incorrectly.
contrary to the victory conditions, I think.
I would
and
agree
maybe
with
I'm
that.
wrong about that. Maybe there's something more to it that I could not see. But if I can defeat you in combat, you lose all your prestige, and then I win.
Yeah.
And there's no other way to gain prestige other than defeating someone in combat.
Yeah, therefore, it's all about the combat. It's not about controlling those
And so
areas.
why
as
would
importantly.
I send one little guy out here and one little guy out here to control areas who are just going to get picked off and I lose the game?
Yeah, so I want to make sure we explain that part of it very well, because the area control, or putting out your pieces, your cylinders, ultimately what that boils down to is the more of those under your control that you have, the better odds you have on a D6 of recruiting your replacements as well as the other recruitable units that you have. The Hispanic...
With a couple of auxiliary units.
Right. The auxiliaries.
And they come out over
Well,
there and,
and then they have to march, and they never got. They got into one. They actually got into position at the end, and they never tasted combat, which was okay. But you started with how many did you have?
I think I started with 7.
You started with 7. So at that point, on a 4, 5, and a 6, you're recruiting. So 50% of the time,
Yeah.
you are not at high prestige.
Yes, we started both at high
Well,
prestige.
but the first combat knocked you down.
Yeah, but we didn't do the first combat for a couple of turns.
You're right.
So we were able to get
You're
those
right.
auxiliaries out.
But having 3 more territories makes it so you recruit on a 3, 4, 5, and a 6. It's just not that.
But to have that many replaceable units, you have to have lost units. And if you've lost those units, and you've got the units spread out across the board, what are you fighting with? Nothing.
Nothing.
So,
Yeah, it's
very frustrating.
it was a little bit frustrating, but
Like, that part of it did not seem to jive with the combat and
it didn't
conditions
seem to
for
fit
prestige.
with it. You're right. It just didn't seem that it was the same. Almost like it was tacked on, and maybe it was. Maybe it was.
I think in my brain it feels kind of like the opposite, where the game used to have a really strong political, but that
And
was
maybe
toned
that was taken
down
off. Sure.
to make it combat focused because people were just winning political victories, maybe.
Sure.
With like,
But
and they were never
still-
fighting, which is also a problem. The opposite is not good.
But with a name like Beware the Ides of March and the historical setup here, yeah, it's about combat, but it would have been cool to have some of that politicking. And actually, one of the headings in the rule book isn't it politics or political something?
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
so
politics.
Yeah, which is just talks about prestige and province control and that stuff.
But I remember when I was reading about this, I thought, oh, there's going to be some of that. Now, that's my fault for thinking that would have that. But
yeah, that's...
anyway, I think I've said, beautiful game. This will appeal to some people because the combat was fun. I actually really enjoyed the
Yeah, I
combat.
liked the combat system.
Yeah, it was cool. It was unique. It's interesting. I do think either side can swing it if some rolls go in their favor early to swing the pendulum on their end. And then it
at
can,
which point it was, 45-minute, 60-minute game, and
Sure.
it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So yes.
this made me laugh too after we've now played. I'm like, why do you even have the Pontus Luxenius up there? Like, why? Because you're in some ways deceiving me.
Well, and then there's the rules for the Gallic Revolt, which occurred. The Gallic Revolt showed up, and then they're like, oh,
if you have units up there,
you can go. And,
I don't.
You can
have
go.
units.
You can walk units halfway across the frickin' board. They can
Yeah.
only go up here.
Yeah.
Then they appear in that box. Then they can get a modifier to put it down.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that's
you don't get any prestige for that, by the way.
no.
You just weaken yourself militarily
Yep.
so that you lose because the enemies just destroy you. Like
the two stacks that I have here are maxed out.
Yes.
I cannot get any more units. Well, that's not true. One or two more, and then I could have had the Macedonians. But I don't have the guys to throw these guys up there. I just don't. I just don't.
But it gets you so little because
right, there's
even if you sent
the
these
juice
two guys
is not
up
worth
there,
the squeeze in that.
you get one
Yeah.
more province, which
Yeah.
doesn't get you to 13.
You're right.
and you don't get any prestige. From
You're right.
it. You get a roll to get more guys, but all your guys are out.
Yeah.
And it was like, why
Yep.
did I do that?
You're correct. You are correct, sir.
There is a disconnect between some of the mechanics in this game. I think that's.
I would
really what
agree
I'm
with
trying to
that.
point
Yes.
out. Which is unfortunate because again, the combat system is fun.
Yes.
So
Agreed.
I hope that you check this out. If this is something that you're interested in, or maybe you might want to like build your own skeleton of something else onto this.
Well, it was funny. We have a friend, Mike Heckman, in St. Louis. The guy will redesign every game that we play.
He literally sent me this week a fix for ASL.
Yeah.
And
And
he knows how to fix ASL.
I
I
lo-
love Mike so much.
I
It's
love
so
it. He's a great guy. And he's very creative, and I like the way he thinks. We're like, let's send this to him and build something else around this to make it a little more operational sandbox.
Yeah, to kind of bring the geography and the politics
And the number
into
of
this
and the
and
number of
mesh
pieces
this.
into the game.
Yeah. Because
Yeah. Agreed.
Otherwise the map really needs to be about this
Yeah,
big and you just fight right
yeah,
there.
Right there. You could have done this on a couple of cards.
Yeah.
A couple of play aids and a card that just took this area.
I think that was, yeah.
We're going to get blasted for this. Amabel's going to kill us.
You know what?
Yeah.
It might be deserved. We might have totally missed something in this game, but I read that rule book a couple times and I don't think I did.
And the funny thing is, this is only the second Hollandspiele game that I haven't necessarily loved, right?
Because you're Empire at Sunrise, right?
Well, that was the other one that I just remember thinking some similar thoughts.
And see, in my brain, I understand the complaints with that one, but in my brain, I'm like, at least it would make a fun solitaire game.
Sure.
Very difficult. This would be a bit more challenging for that, with the nature of how open it is, and it's like, well, we're still just doing this.
Sure.
And so I don't know if this would make a good solo game at all.
And I just hope that we're explaining ourselves why the naval movement also is very, very challenging. So you can't go down here. It's almost you have to stay along the, and it's just so hard.
Or it takes so
Forever.
long. And but also,
that there's no benefit.
what's the point?
You get one more pip, and it just doesn't matter because you can only recruit one guy per turn with a replacement. That's it.
And so you have to have lost guys in combat.
Yeah.
So you have to be in combat.
Yeah.
For that to
Yeah. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I'm glad we played it. I am. I'm glad we played it. I'm glad I experienced it. There's a lot of neat things here. I'm just not sure it all works together as well as I think it was intended.
Yeah, again, combat system, really fun, very
Yeah.
dynamic, quite tense at times. Yeah, it's some dice rolling, but
Yeah.
I like that part of it. I think the rest of the game was a bit of a disconnect. But, Ides of March from Hollandspiele. It's out there. Check it out if this is something that you're interested, but appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander for PlayerSaid.com.
And I'm Grant.